Well, hello there. Welcome to Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, going mostly solo, episode 1, where I'm going to take you through character creation. So, Baldur's Gate, very, very famous PC game. Original version came out over 20 years ago, which is a scary thought, and I've been playing it pretty much since then. And since we are in lockdown, I've had a little bit of an excess of time on my hands. So I thought, what could be a better thing to do than to play through Baldur's Gate and try and do a little bit of XP farming and play the game mostly solo. I have heard of people who have, completed the game completely solo, just with one character rather than building a party, but I fear I'm not quite that good at the game. So I will show you the ropes and the basics of, how to get through particularly most of the early game on your own and build up a pretty decent character before you start building a party, and only really building a party to the size for where you just have all the essentials that you need to be able to complete the game without too much hassle. So the idea of this is that I'm going to create a character, and if I have enough time, I will walk him through the entirety of the main story and quite a bit of the side quests in Baldur's Gate itself, export the character at the end of the game, and then take him through Baldur's Gate Shadows of Arm, Baldur's Gate 2 that. And I've never actually beaten Throne of Baal, so it might be a good time to try and complete the set, as it were, and do that with a character created right now. So we're going to start a new game now. For the purposes of this video, I'm just going to talk you through which character classes I think are the best ones to do an almost solo run with. Some character classes are better at the start of the game at really low levels, and some become increasingly more powerful and arguably overpowered the more levels you put on them. So I'll talk you through the advantages and the disadvantages of the particular classes that I have used when not playing with a party, and some of the choices that you will have to make, particularly if you have half a mind on taking this character into Baldur's Gate 2. Because there are a few implications in choices that you make now that could have some pretty serious ramifications by the time you get to the beginning of Throne of Baal 2. So, gender, as it says, is pretty much a cosmetic thing in terms of the actual gameplay itself, and the only real impact it has on the story is in Baldur's Gate 2, more than Baldur's Gate 1. There are potential romances to be had, and the race you pick and the gender you pick will determine which romances you can do. So with the view of doing my particular favourite romance in Baldur's Gate 2, I am going to choose a bloke, and I'm a bloke, so seems appropriate. They've added a few portraits to the the set that was available in the original game from BG2 and a few other add-ons. They're generally quite good, but I'm just going to use this guy here because he looks the most like I did 20 years ago, and I'm not actually going to finish creating the character within the video, so it doesn't really matter which thing I pick, because I'm just talking you through the options, and I'll need to roll a few garbage stats when we get to the abilities, just so that I can show you the appropriate skills that you will want to start the game with if you choose one of my preferred classes. So now that we have the portrait sorted out, let's have a look at races. Now, this is one of the most important choices that you will make, unsurprisingly. Basically, the rule is, if you are a human, you can choose any class, and there are absolutely no limits on how far you can progress. The other thing is that they can dual class. The other races, elf down to half-orc here, can multi-class. Multi-classing versus dual classing is a rather profound choice to make with your character. Multi-classing means that you can advance to any level in your chosen classes. In BG1, I don't terribly recommend multi-classing, because it really slows down your character development, and depending on the restrictions of the classes that you choose to bring together, it can make the game a little bit harder, and you end up losing out on your the amount of hit points that you can get per level as well, which is particularly a big disadvantage at the beginning of the game, where it can be particularly tough, particularly if you are in a character class that doesn't have a huge amount of hit points. So I generally recommend playing as kind of like a pure single class, but if you are having an eye on importing your character into Baldur's Gate 2, then human is a good place to start, because you can build up your character level in BG1 and then multi-class it. Rather, you can dual class it in BG2. This does mean that you have to pay attention to the stats that you roll, but when we get to the abilities page, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So humans, nothing special other than they can dual class, and I'll explain a little bit more about the mechanics of that a little bit later. Okay, so elf is the the classic Tolkien high fantasy race that most people who have heard a little or done a little bit of D&D generally kind of like go for first. They're the most accessible kind of like non-human race. They do come with quite a few really good advantages. This resistance against charm and sleep is particularly handy against spellcasters who will like to hit you when you're down. Improvision is available to pretty much all of the non-human races. This allows you to see further in the dark, but humans can pick up equipment that will give you this ability, so it's not really worth talking about a huge amount, because you can pick up stuff to compensate for it as a human really easily, quite quickly in the game, so it's not really worth worrying about. This to hit armor class 0 bonus is really handy. So you have a racial hit bonus for bows, short swords and long swords, and these are pretty much the most common weapons in the game that also are quite easy to pick up with magical bonuses. So this is quite a good little advantage for you to have. You also get a few bonuses to the thieving skills. If you're going to play as a thief, an elf is a good choice, doubly so because you get a racial dexterity bonus as well. This affects your armor class and is pretty handy for giving you bonuses to hit with ranged weapons as well. The constitution penalty is going to reduce your hit points and the maximum that you will be able to get. This might be a little bit of a problem, but it depends on how you assign your points in your kind of like your stat rolls. But we'll get to that later. One thing to bear in mind as an elf. If you play as an elf class, you will not be able to access the Viconia romance in BG2, which is the one I want to play, so I am not going to be choosing an elf. But if you are quite new to the game and you fancy playing something who's not human, elf is pretty good place to start, regardless of class. Half elf has kind of like anemic, slimmed down, watered down versions of the racial bonuses for the elf. They can multi-class, which for some people may think that that's an advantage, but they can't dual class. I think the first character I ever played in BG was a half-elf, and by the time I'd imported them into Baldur's Gate 2 and got about halfway through the story, I kind of regretted it. So, yeah, they're okay, but you probably don't want to bother. Dwarves, they get some really decent saving throw bonuses. And they are one of the best for constitution in the game, because they can start with a maximum of kind of like 19 constitution, and if you find the manual, the Tome of Bodily Health I think it's called, that gives you a +1 bonus to constitution, and you use it on your character, 20 constitution in this particular game means that you regenerate hit points. So you regenerate health without having to use potions or cast spells over time. That's really, really handy, particularly if you are playing a character class that doesn't have any kind of like casting ability to actually heal themselves. So the dexterity bonus is not so bad if you're playing as a kind of like a warrior class, because you can just wear really heavy armor. But if you are playing as a thief to take advantage of these racial bonuses, that's a little bit of a problem. And charisma, yeah, this will mean that things are a bit more expensive for you. So normally the charisma score is only important if you're trying to hold a diverse party with different alignments together. Not so much of a problem if you're playing solo, but that -2 on the charisma score will affect how NPCs react to you, and the better they react to you, the bigger the discount they'll give you in your store. So that will end up costing you a little bit of gold in the long run. So don't generally play as dwarves. Though if you are going to play as a big tank class that requires a high constitution, they're not a bad choice at all. Halflings the next. These are the hobbits. Again, nice bonuses to a few saving throws. You get a racial bonus with slings. Good dexterity bonus, so it's quite good for playing thieves. but the strength penalty and the wisdom penalty. The wisdom penalty is not such a big problem because of the saving throw bonuses that you get here. But it's not good if you want to play as a cleric. And the -1 to strength, because they're tiny, yeah, not so good for kind of like warrior classes, because having a penalty to the strength makes it harder to get hit bonuses. Gnome, don't think I've ever played as a gnome. The wisdom penalty is not so bad as long as you're not a divine or nature caster. The +1 to intelligence would be good for mages, but gnomes can only play as illusionists. So they're not the most versatile of spellcasters. So yeah, bof, as the French say. Not my favourite race by a long shot, and I don't think I've ever really played one for more than half an hour. Last race to choose from is the half-orc. Big, huge penalty to intelligence, which can be quite fun in dialogue if you leave the intelligence score below 9. It's like 8 or less, and they won't be able to talk properly, which can be quite fun in reading stuff, because people will just treat you like you're thick because you are. But you do get a nice hefty strength and constitution racial bonus, which means half-orcs are perfect if you want to play the barbarian kit. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail when we actually look at the character classes in a second. So half-orc barbarian is a force of nature. They are pretty gnarly, particularly at the beginning of the game. But because I want to leave open the possibility of dual classing in BG2, I'm going to play as a human. And when we get to the abilities tab, when we're actually setting our strength, dexterity, constitution scores, etc., we'll talk a little bit more about the prerequisites for dual classing. So I'm going to be human, just to match my portrait. And let's choose a class. Okay, so the character class, as it says, is, you know, what you're specialised in, and what you're trained for. If you have gone for non-human, in the class list down here, you'll see, actually, it's probably going to be easier if I just show you. So if I just temporarily pick elf, you can see that these are the multi-classes that are available for this race. You can also get fighter druid, fighter cleric if you're choosing half elf. So if you can imagine, fighter mage thief may sound like the perfect solo class, because you have all the skills of a fighter. You can cast spells, and you can sneak around and backstab people and find traps and open locks and things. Sounds great in theory, and in theory it is, but all of the experience points are going to be divided up between, you know, the classes in your multi-class. So you end up leveling a lot slower than if you just picked a pure class. So on a solo run, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. Again, another reason why I'm just choosing human, because it opens up the future possibility for me to actually do the multi-class. So for the human, they start out with, you know, all the classes, character classes on the table. and you have the potential future ability to be able to dual class. So when you click on one of these, it will tell you if you can actually dual class. So if I were to pick a thief as my main class, I could then dual to a fighter as long as I have enough strength to be able to do so. Now the way dual classing works is you reach a certain level in your primary class, let's say thief. So let's say I go up to level 6 as a thief, and then I want to duel to either a mage or a fighter, for example. All of the abilities that I have gained in my primary class kind of get deactivated, and I can't use my backstab or open locks, pickpockets, while my secondary class level is lower or equal to whatever I reached in my primary class. So to be able to use all my thieving skills again as a fighter thief, I need to beat the level as a fighter that I started out with. Because the experience cap and level cap in BG1 is quite low, it's about 180,000 XP, which may sound like a lot, but when you see how, you know, the number of experience points you need doubles up to, you know, give you more and more levels. Even with kind of like classes that don't require so much experience to level up like Thief, even though you can kind of like reach quite a high level for, you know, 40,000 XP, if you know, reach the level cap, you're only ever going to be able to, you know, get up to a maximum of kind of like 7, 8, or if you're very lucky, level 9 in BG1. So if you are going to dual class, pick the class that you want to play with now and give them the stats that you will, for the extra class you want them to pick up in Baldur's Gate 2. So if I'm picking, let's say, a fighter to begin with, because I just basically want all those lovely hit dice, I need to pay attention to either, say, the intelligence score or the dexterity score to make sure that after I picked up as many levels in fighter as I want, I can then, you know, still be able to actually do the dual class. So fighter, probably the most straightforward of the character classes to play, because they can use any weapon, wear any armor, they can specialize in particular weapons to get hit bonuses much more than any other class. So they can put up to 5 slots of specialization and mastery in, you know, each type of weapon, whereas a lot of the other classes only allow you 1 slot, and a couple out there like the Ranger, the Paladin, will allow 2. So they're quite good fun to play, particularly if, you know, you decide that you want to put a couple of points into the 2 weapon style and basically just wander around with a couple of long swords or a couple of scimitars and be all Drizzt Do'Urden and just turn things into mincemeat and kibble. Yeah, can be quite fun. Now, one of the things that was introduced in Baldur's Gate 2 is this idea that you can actually have sub-kits. So if you choose a fighter, which if you've never played the game before is not a bad place to start. You may want to look at a couple of the class kits, because they can be actually pretty handy in a solo run. The Wizard Slayer is probably more useful as a class kit in BG2 because you reach a higher level and you get greater magic resistance. But this here is absolutely sweet. You know, being able to mess with spellcasters and just hit them and stop them from casting spells is a great leveler. Problem is you're really restricted in what magic items you can use. On the whole, I've played with a Wizard Slayer in BG2, and at those higher levels, that definitely outweighs that, especially when you throw in the magic resistance as well. So maybe not for BG1, but do consider it for BG2, particularly if you're multi-classing and importing something that you're going to dual class the fighter. The other kit, great for a solo run, is Barbarian. The reason being, they get an extra 2 hit points per level. In BG2, they will get, you know, some pretty good extra damage resistances, and while they may not be able to achieve the weapon mastery and wear all the armors like the normal fighter kits do, they are faster, so they can walk around the map quicker. They can run away from ogres a little bit quicker, which is quite a good tactic, particularly when you're at first level. And this immunity to backstab is absolutely fantastic, because you will occasionally end up in traps where you're going to get backstabbed, and that's not a great thing in terms of your health level. And this rage ability, which basically means you're immune to a whole load of things, and you get bonuses to your strength, constitution, and your saving throws, is absolutely brutal. It's a really, really good thing to have. So not being able to wear the best armors and being limited to splint mail actually is not quite so bad, because these bonuses to your hit points and your ability to hit stuff, particularly if you're playing as a half-orc who already has 19 strength and 19 constitution, you're just a juggernaut of destruction. It's really, really good fun to play. So fighter, yeah, highly recommended for a solo run, particularly if you've not, you know, played too much of the game before. Next class I recommend, the Ranger. This is probably my favourite class, actually. One thing that was introduced in BG2 was the fact that they come with a specialisation in 2 weapon style. And because it's a kind of like a warrior class, you get 4 little slots of weapon specialisation at the first level, which means that you can max out your 2 weapon style at level 1. And you can put 2 slots of weapon specialisation into your preferred single-handed melee weapon. And you still have a point left over for a ranged weapon, so you don't actually have any, you know, penalties for, you know, using a bow. This is pretty mighty. They can wear any armor, use any weapon. You can even select a racial enemy, which gives you a nice bonus to hit. When we get to the point in the game, I will give you a hint as to what you might want to be selecting as this, if you do choose a ranger. And this charm animal ability is also really quite handy, because if you're a level 1 ranger and you're wandering through the woods and 3 wolves decide that they want to have you for lunch, being able to charm 1 or 2 of them to stop them eating you, and actually help you out killing the other wolves, is really quite handy. You're not really going to be casting spells in BG1 because the level cap is too low. You must be good. That's fair enough. And you can hide in the shadows and sneak around if you are wearing armour less than studded leather. Which, on the whole, may be quite good. You can dual class to ranger, I believe, from cleric or druid. I can't remember off the top of my head. You can't have a fighter ranger. It has to be a cleric ranger, I think. As you can see there, you're probably best off starting at ranger because you know the prime requisites are, you know, you need 17 in 3 stats to be able to duel to ranger, which may or may not be a problem depending on your you know, how well you roll your cleric. But yeah, I would generally just play as a ranger and not really worry about the class kits because they're not that great for low level characters. Being an archer, you know, it may sound great to be able to put a grand mastery in longbows, but the disadvantage is you can only wear crap armor, you don't get the charm animal, and you only have half the proficiency in you know, hand-to-hand melee weapons. So you spend a lot of time running away hoping not to get eaten, which is not that handy really. The stalker, okay, you get a hidey bonus and you can backstab a little bit, but that doesn't really kick off until, you know, you're playing BG2. You're certainly not going to get up to 12 levels and get your haste spell in this game, and not being able to wear more than studded leather. Not so great, really. But having said that, there is a really good studded leather +3, which actually gives you move silently and hide in shadow bonuses. But I'll show you that when we actually start the game. But all things considered, I just play as a straight ranger. Paladin is also a pretty good class to go solo with. Advantages again being any weapon, any armor can be specialized in any weapon class. You get a limited amount to heal, plus you get some nice detection spells and protection spells. Turning undead can be handy if you're being mobbed by zombies or something like that, but in BG1 you're not going to be able to, you know, cast any pre-spells. You're not going to, it's too high above the level cap. The bonus of the saving throws is really handy, and of course you get a stack full of hit points as well. Paladin is one of those classes that can't be duelled. You know, if you're a paladin, you're a paladin. You're not dabbling as something else. In terms of class kits, I wouldn't bother with the Cavalier in BG1 because you're not going to be fighting demons and dragons, and you want to be able to use missile weapons, as you will see when we go to the bandit camp. Inquisitor is quite good. You lose a little bit of your healing and your ability to turn undead, but you do get immunity to hold and charm, which is very handy, and you can mess with spellcasters by using Dispel Magic. The fact that, you know, it's cast almost instantly and acts at twice your character level, that's really powerful. One of my old friends, Craig, he swears by the Inquisitor, and it's basically what he always plays at. So that's his favourite class. Yeah, it's quite good. Generally, in BG2, I prefer the Undead Hunter, because in BG2 you end up fighting a lot of vampires, so being immune to Horde and level drain is a godsend, as is the bonus to hit and damage undead. Very, very good. And, you know, you don't actually lose that much by not being able to lay on hands. So, really nice character kit. Now, if you think paladins are all goody two-shoes, then you've not seen the Blackguard. They're evil. They're really, really nasty characters. So if you know, just want to go around being evil to people, as a solo character, this is probably the best evil character class that you can actually play. So immune to level drain and fear, really handy. You can turn undead. You absorb health rather than lay on hands, which means that you're actually sucking hit points and health from an enemy and to heal yourself, which is really quite good. Poison weapon is, again, very handy. Does extra damage for you know, melee attacks, and you can even have this aura of despair that gives some quite nasty penalties to any enemies around you. Yeah, does mean that you must be evil, but some people like that. Cleric. Now you may see, oh dear, doesn't have too many hit points, and you may think, oh god, I'm not playing as a cleric. But it does have a few advantages, and actually it's not such a bad class for soloing, because you get to use any armor. You have, okay, a limited choice of weapons, but one of the best weapons in the game actually is a warhammer, and when you start out, you won't actually pick the weapon proficiency in Warhammer. What you'll do is you'll take it in Flail Morningstar instead, because at the beginning of the game, Warhammers are a bit crappy, and you really need the hit bonuses from a magical weapon to do a large amount of damage as a cleric. Because, you know, they're not a natural warrior class, hence they're only allowed one slot in the weapon proficiencies. That may sound pretty terrible. However, when you look at the cleric spells and this ability to turn undead, this is really quite handy indeed. Because clerics actually level a little bit quicker than fighters, rangers and paladins. So for the same amount of experience points, you will actually get more levels in a cleric than you would in a ranger or a fighter or a paladin. So you can pick up spells quite early in the game, which will really help you out in combat. So at level 1 you get a spell called Command that basically just tells people to drop unconscious, allowing you to batter them to death with your club or mace or whatever it is you're hitting them when they're on the floor with. And by the time you get to level 3, level 4, you can cast Hold Person again, which works on groups of enemies as well. because it, you know, casts within a radius of your target. So if you've got a big cluster of enemies, you can just cast hold person on them, and if the primary target fails their saving throw, it will, you know, just freeze people in place, giving you the chance to batter the hell out of them with your Morning Star, or, you know, whatever your non-bladed weapon is. Also, you can heal. You know, you have pre-spells that allow you to, you know, recover hit points without using you know, potions. You even get a spell that will allow you to find traps, and finding traps is usually the job of the thief, but more on the thief in a minute. So the cleric is actually pretty good. It's pretty versatile to play as on a solo run. Having said that, you do need to be a little bit careful, because this only being proficient rather than being able to specialize or achieve mastery in weapon classes means that you do take a little bit of a penalty to your ability to hit targets. And, you know, you don't want to be standing around taking half an hour to finish off a kobold that's, you know, is worth a whopping 7 experience points. Because you know your weapon proficiency isn't good enough to hit this poor little yippy thing. The way around that is to make sure that you have a really good strength in your ability scores, because if you have a strength over 15, you will get, you know, bonuses to your score to actually hit enemies. So even though, you know, you might only need 13 strength to be able to wear plate armor, and hence some of the best armors in the game, you need that bonus to hit. So don't skimp on the strength. It's better to actually just rely on the really heavy armor to give you a good armor class, and sacrifice a little bit of dexterity if you have to, rather than the strength. There are also kits for the cleric class. That's a tongue twister. Interesting about these kits is that the disadvantages are only restricting your alignment. So that probably isn't going to be a big problem for most people. So if you want to choose a cleric, there's actually no reason not to go for one of the kits, as long as they're within the, you know, the alignment that you want to play. So, you know, just have a look through and decide, you know, do I want to play a neutral character, a good character, an evil character? Which bonuses of, you know, the extra spells and powers are, you know, gonna fit in with your playstyle. My preferred ones are probably the Priest of Tempest and the Priest of Helm. If you want to play someone who's particularly evil and cruel, yeah, just go for the Priest of Talos. Yeah, being able to cast Lightning Bolt is, yeah, pretty good. And you know, you can even play as chaotic neutral if you don't want to be explicitly evil. So that's not a bad choice either, because that is like a third level mage spell at most of the time. So that's a pretty good place to start. Okay, so we're getting into territory where not so good for solo runs. Druid, just say no. You can't equip very good shields, your weapon choices are limited, your spells aren't as good as a cleric would have, and you know, even though you have this shapeshifter kit, which allows you to turn into a werewolf, which is amazing, by the way, you really want to be a very, very high level if you're going to play with this class kit. So save this one for BG2. Because, you know, the penalties are not being able to wear any armor at all is not good for a first level character, which is why I didn't, you know, recommend the Kensai as a solo class in the fighter kits. So yeah, save the shape-shifting until BG2. Mage. Now, it is possible to solo a mage, but it is exceptionally hard because at the beginning of the game you have a pathetic number of hit points, and there are enemies in the game until you are quite high level, you know, 4, 5, level 6 as a mage, that will just be able to kill you in one hit. Don't try soloing this unless you are really, really experienced in the game. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of reloading. But it's one of those classes that you can duel to. So one of the things that I've done with one of my other characters is I've started them off as a fighter, made sure that my intelligence is high enough to duel to, and then, you know, once I've used the fighter class to build up a nice amount of hit points, which you don't lose when you dual class, you can then build up your spell casting until, you know, you actually unlock the fighter abilities again. So fighter mage as a dual class can work well, but soloing as a pure mage, don't try it. just please don't. I'm going to skip over the thief for now because I'm going to come back to that later. Bard, again, because of the proficiency, the slightly limited number of hit points, and while you do get a really, really nice law score and you can pick pockets, your arcane spellcasting ability is a bit rubbish, and to make the best use of the Bard Song you need other people in the party, so that then they're not great to play with alone, you know, because they can only wear middling armor and they're not that great in melee, they're not that great at spellcasting, so, you know, not for solo. Sorcerer has pretty much the same problems as a mage does, except that while you may be able to cast more spells, you don't get the same variety of spells that you would have as a mage. So not recommended. Monk, again, is one of these classes where you can't wear armor. Really very, very vulnerable as a solo class, but get ridiculously overpowered at high levels. So again, if you want to play as a monk, save it until Baldur's Gate 2. Shaman, I've not really messed with. Seems a little bit like a druid for the most part, but the main advantage of using the class is this shamanic dance, which gives, yeah, you know, a few nature spirits that'll help you out, but I'd just rather get in there and bash stuff myself, if you see what I mean. And you don't get any bonuses from a wisdom. Yeah, I haven't really messed with these that much, and there aren't that many items that, you know, fit into their, you know, the weapons that they can use and the armors that they're available to use. It's a little bit like the sorcerer version of a druid, if you see what I mean. Not really recommended at all. I'm not especially fond of the class. Now, thief, on the other hand, as a reason I've saved this to last, because this is the character class that I'm going to play with. I have heard of people completing the game with only a thief in the party and doing the whole thing solo, including the final battle in the Undercity. I fear I am not that good at playing the game, so this is why it's going to be an almost solo run. I'm going to play the game as much as I can with just one player. There will be occasions where I will want to bring another person into the party, and you'll probably see why when we get to those points. But the main advantage of the thief is, despite the relatively weedy hit dice, these skills are very, very useful indeed. And they do overcome the fact that, you know, you can't really equip proper shields. You're limited in the weapons that you are able to equip. You can't really become better than proficient. And, you know, studded leather is the best armor you can get. However, being able to open locks, pick pockets, find traps, sneak around. I don't really use the set traps ability that much. That's more useful in BG2, especially if you're fighting dragons. But maybe we can talk about that when, as and when we get to BG2. When we actually do the kind of like the introductory video in Candlekeep, I will show you why this particular skill, the open locks, is very, very useful indeed at the beginning of the game. I won't give any spoilers at the moment, but it's probably one of the best classes to solo with, because it doesn't require too many experience points to level up, so it levels really quickly, and you know, makes your character a little bit more powerful and a little bit more useful, and it's just about good enough in combat, particularly if you like doing the move silently, hide in shadows, backstabby thingy, to do not quite as much as damage as you would do as a warrior class, but you can hold your own. Now, one of the interesting things about this backstab ability, when you link it up with the weapons that you're able to get, you can be a bit sneaky. Yeah, you're a thief after all. In terms of really maximizing the amount of damage that you can do. So the best melee weapons in the game that you can get are a longsword +2, a short sword +2, a scimitar +2, and there is a dagger +2 out there as well, but that, yeah, it's never going to do the same amount of damage as a longsword and scimitar. The katana is interesting. Because unlike the longsword, which has a 1d8 as its damage multiplier, the katana is a d12. And if you imagine that you're getting good attack rolls with your katana and you are then multiplying that by your backstab increase quotient here, this becomes an incredibly powerful ability. Now, there is only one magical katana in the game, and you are not going to get that until you reach Cloakwood. So you have to go quite far through the game before you can actually take advantage of that. But if you are playing the long game, it is potentially worth it. When we do the introductory video, I will show you, if you are going to take the katana, there is a kind of critical thing that you need to do with your points when you get your 40 thieving ability points at the first level. I'll explain that in a minute. In terms of the kits that you get, I wouldn't really bother with them in BG1. They're more useful in BG2. If you want to, you know, be a little bit of a flashing blade, you can choose the swashbuckler class. It's kind of like the Errol Flynn swashbuckler. It gives you this bonus to your armor class, and an additional 1 every 5 levels. So in BG1, this is potentially going to give you 2 bonus to your armor class, which is quite handy, especially since you can actually specialize in a melee weapon, which the other kits can't do. This 2 weapon style thing, it will take you a long time to get 3 points that you can actually specialize into this weapon style, so it's not really worth it, especially when you can actually specialize in the one-handed weapon style that gives you an extra bonus to your armor class. So you can become incredibly hard to hit, especially if you have an incredibly high dexterity. So if you were to play as an elf with a very high dexterity, and then, you know, pick this as your kit and have your one-handed fighting style, you're getting quite close to, you know, a very, very good armor class without even wearing any armor. The disadvantage is no backstab. And depending on how you like to play your role, your rogues or your thieves, this may be an issue. The Shadow Dancer, good if you like sneaking, but your backstab multiplier is reduced as well, and you don't get as many skill points. So at the kind of levels that you're going to reach in BG1, it's not as good as a normal thief, even with, you know, the saving throw bonus and this, you know, hide in plain sight and shadow step ability. Oh, I'd only really consider this if I was playing as a super sneaky thief. Otherwise, I'm just going to play as normal. So I'm going to pick thief. So I will click done there. So I'm just going to ignore the fact that my thief is wearing plate armor, and move on to alignment. So certain character classes are, you know, restricted by the alignment that they're allowed. You have to try really hard to, you know, sway away from your alignment to to actually see what these consequences are. So if you're a paladin who is restricted to lawful good and you just go around killing everyone, you will lose your not your alignment as such, but you will actually lose the powers from your god because you've gone away from your oath, and that means that you don't get access to any of your special abilities until you've been redeemed, which is quite hard to do. So that's a slight consideration when you're picking your alignment. In general day-to-day life, I would normally consider myself to be a true neutral, but in terms of, you know, making sure that NPCs in the game react to you a little bit better, it's a good idea to choose a good alignment. A good idea. No, that's unintentional pun there. So a good reaction is, you know, quite beneficial. Also links into your charisma score. So I'm going to go chaotic good because I don't understand why these lawful alignments are in there for the thief. Because who's ever heard of a lawful thief? So I'm going to go chaotic good because chaotic means I can be capricious and do whatever the hell I like. But I have a good heart. I'm not needlessly cruel. So abilities. Right. I'm going to roll a few garbage stats just to take us to the next screen. But spoiler alert, your character is the progeny of one of the gods of the realm. So he is meant to be an exceptional person. So I have no problem at all giving this guy some pretty decent stats. Particularly with the view that I may want to dual class him to fighter or mage in BG2. So in terms of this number down here, in terms of the total roll, you really want to be making sure that all of your primary stats are maxed out, and it tells you up here whether it's important to you. So, you know, the thief, you really want a thief with, you know, the maximum dexterity that you can get. Otherwise, why are you bothering? Constitution is important for everybody, because this determines your number of hit points. Strength is again useful for pretty much everybody, because it determines your not just how much you can carry and the armor that you can wear, but it also will determine whether you get hit bonuses for melee weapons. So you need a strength above 15 to be able to get those bonuses, which is really important for those classes like cleric and thief, where you don't have the ability to go beyond proficient in your weapon skills. So anything in the mid to high 80s is okay. So 84 here is actually, yeah, quite good. So I'm gonna max out my dexterity. I'll keep the strength there, and I'll make sure my constitution is pretty solid so that I'm not getting any hit point penalties, but I'm not getting any bonuses either. I could, you know, take the points out of here and redistribute them and put any excess in charisma, again to help my reaction and get discounts from stores and stuff. But if I wanted, for example, to, you know, duel to mage in BG2, I need to leave that intelligence at 17. So just for, I'm not going to use this role because I may change my mind on whether I want to duel as a mage or a fighter. for the actual run that I'm going to do. But just to show you the next screen, I'm just going to click done and show you the skills page. Okay, so you get to choose your weapon proficiencies, and depending on your class you'll either get 1, 2 or 4. So things like mage and sorcerer will only get 1 proficiency slot. If you are playing them, go for sling, because you don't want your mage and spellcaster in melee. It's just not a good idea at level 1. If you have 2 proficiency slots for a cleric and a thief, it's a good idea to have 1 as a missile range weapon, so crossbow or shortbow. Because shortbows are more common, I'm going to go for a shortbow. They're easier and cheaper to acquire a magical shortbow than it is a crossbow. They're also faster in terms of their weapon speed as well. They have a quicker turnaround, so even though they do less damage potentially than a crossbow, I'll take the shortbow. Now, for the game that we're going to play, I'm going to take the katana. Even though there's only one in there's only one magical one in the game, that at least that I've found anyway. So even though the magical longswords and the magical scimitars are more common, I'm going to take this one anyway because of the extra damage that it can do. For the solo cleric, actually the weapon specialization is not available to the thief here, but there's a flail morning star. I would take that one as my melee weapon if I were playing cleric. In terms of the other character classes, if you're choosing the warriors, I mentioned earlier that a ranger, you should be putting maxing out your 2 weapon style, maxing out your longsword or maybe your scimitar if you want to pick up the magical scimitars in the game and pretend you're Drizzt. And your 4th and final proficiency slot I will put in longbow, which the thief can't use, hence why it's not on the list. If you are playing as a fighter, I would simply put either 2 in longsword or 2 in two-handed sword and 2 in longbow, and the same for a paladin as well. Yeah, it's a good balance having you know really decent ranged weapon backed up by one of the higher scoring melee weapons in terms of its damage. Whether you prefer a longsword or whether you prefer the two-handed sword is a matter of preference, really. Magical longswords are much more readily available in BG1 and BG2, but the two-handed one does a little bit more damage but can't be used with a shield, so yeah, make your choice. The other reason I'm going for the katana is when I import this dude into BG2, there is a very special katana that you can buy from the Adventurer's Mart, which is very, very good if you want to duel your thief to a mage, which I may end up doing. Right. Now, the thief also has, these thieving skills. Pickpockets, open lock, find traps, blah, 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 blah. At level 1, chuck everything into open locks. You will see why I recommend that you do this when you watch the next video. I won't ruin the surprise now, but at the beginning of the game, this is where you want all your points. Everything else can wait, because you will level up fairly quickly and be able to, you know, fill out your find traps, move silently, hide in the shadows, and your pickpocket skill as well. So everything goes in there to begin with, as a must. Since you are not playing as a mage or a sorcerer, and if you are, you don't need any advice from me. If you are a cleric, at the skills screen, instead of choosing, you know, these thieving skills, you will actually choose the spells that you start with. So depending on your wisdom bonus, you will get to choose between 1 and 3 spells to memorize for use. Make sure that you pick command and cure light wounds, and that will see you through the opening section of the game. At some point I may actually, you know, show you an early game cleric to, you know, just show you how, you know, that sling Morningstar command and cure light wounds combination actually works, assuming you put up enough enough thought into your combat. I'm not sure that sentence made sense because I lost track of it in the middle. It's getting late. It's 3 minutes past midnight as I'm recording this, so you'll have to forgive me. Okay, so I think that's probably a good indication that I should probably wrap this video up, because I've been talking for far too long as it is. So there's not much point taking you through the appearance and the name, because, yeah, who cares? The last thing I should probably mention in this video is that I'm going to be playing on normal difficulty. Now, there's a very good reason for this. It's because I've got better things to do than, you know, reloading encounters, because I didn't quite get the tactics right. Especially if, you know, I accidentally get dire charmed by a siren and that's an instant game over. You know, in my not so humble opinion, I don't really care about difficulty levels. I just want to have fun, and then I just think that the best player is the one that has the most fun. You know, not the one who is the most tactically astute and can beat the game blindfold at Legacy of Baal difficulty with no potions. I just don't care. And if you disagree, well, you can bugger off, because I'm in charge and this is my video. Make your own. And on that bombshell, I thank you for your attention, and if you ever do want to do a mostly solo run of Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition, I hope that little tutorial on which classes you can choose from and what skills you should be looking at will prove useful to you. Thank you for watching, and I will hope to have another video recorded and online fairly soon. Stay safe in the lockdown, and see you soon.